Good evening, you're with ET Now and this is the India Development Debate. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy joining you live from the News Centre in Mumbai, and joining me in Delhi is my colleague Supriya Srini. Our debate tonight. The farm sector is in distress. The GDP data for the second quarter shows that agriculture has been the biggest casualty, growing at a paltry 1.7% at a time when the economy is slowly getting back on track. And the Modi government knows that this could well cost them dearly in the run-up to the 2019 general elections. Even in battleground Gujarat, which goes to polls in the next few days, the poor plight of farmers has been one of the contentious issues. The government is already in a firefighting mode, with Finance Minister Arun Jaitley today holding a meeting with key stakeholders of the agriculture industry as part of the pre-budget consultation.
Now, despite the growing number of farmer suicides, the centre has ruled out a big bang loan waiver, leaving it to the discretion of the state governments to do so if they so desire. ET now believes that fiscal prudence is of utmost importance, especially at a time when growth is picking up momentum. At the same time, boosting farm output is of utmost importance, if not more as well, considering the high employment potential and the dependence and the mainstay of our big population. We believe that it is time to look beyond loan waivers and minimum support prices and come out with a long-term farm policy, a to-do list for the Modi government to prop the farm sector. That's a topic of discussion and big debate right here on the India Development Debate tonight. And joining us on the show this evening, a stellar panel. We've got Siraj Hussain, former Agriculture Secretary, Ajay V. Jakar, Chairman, Bharat Krishak Samaj, Indian Farmers Forum, Yogendra Yadav, founder and national president of the Swaraj Party, and joining us both from the Congress and the BJP being represented by GV Narasimha Rao on this debate, and Salman Anis represents the Congress Party. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Appreciate you taking time out and joining us this evening as we discuss and debate a very important issue, which is rural distress, and what can the government do to fix it, given the fact that the budget consultations have started customarily with the agriculture sector. GV Narasimha Rao, you represent the ruling benches, and it's only fair that I begin this discussion with you. The first 3 years of this government has seen the agriculture sector grow by less than 2%. Will you concede that agriculture has been a red on your report card?
You see, due to a bad monsoon for 2-3 years, I think the agricultural growth had been very sluggish. And the credit for the 4% or 3% growth in the earlier years, I think, goes mainly to the BJP ruled states which have delivered double-digit growth, be it Gujarat, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh. Certainly, the government has now started spending heavily. The public spending in rural infrastructure has gone up. I think if monsoon favoring agriculture, I think we will register a very good growth in this year. We have had very good agricultural output in the last 2 seasons. Certainly, I think we have achieved the highest record production in pulses, in food grains. So certainly but the growth in the sector, I think the farmer incomes is where we really want to focus in the remainder of this government's term. We've also wanted to enhance the income security for the farmers, and the wide implementation of the Prime Minister's crop insurance scheme, which has been taken on in a big way by farmers across different states, and mainly in BJP ruled states, has certainly given the income security to the farmers. So this government is working towards ensuring a stable income and also a doubling of income. The Niti Aayog had come up with a detailed vision document as to how this will be achieved by 2022, and certainly the action plan for the same has already been put into place. The last 3 years, I think we need to really make up for the lost opportunity, and this government has its right priorities, and we will certainly deliver in the remainder of the term.
Okay, fair enough. Now, we've got politicians on the panel, and yet we don't want to politicize the issue. I think that's an important point that we want to make upfront, because this is a crucial issue that we're discussing on a day like today, when the government has come out with a policy incentivizing exporters. We've chosen to debate the agriculture sector. We want to give it the due attention. Yogendra Yadav, is it fair to blame the government when, like GV Narasimha Rao pointed out, we've had 2 successive years of drought for which the government cannot be held responsible, and also it's coincided with the global crash in prices of agri products. Global price of wheat is down 47% in 3 years. Maize is down by 39%. So is it unfair to pin the blame entirely on the government?
Of course, not entirely on the government, but I thought Mr. Narasimha Rao was very economical with truth. Yes, we've had 2 years of drought, not 3, 2 years of drought and very poor drought relief. I think that would have made for a fuller statement. A shoddy drought relief, not even conforming to the legal standards that are required. There is a Supreme Court case going on. I would not get into more of that. 2, in situations of drought and natural calamity, the insurance schemes launched by the government, the previous insurance schemes and the latest version, have actually failed to deliver. That's the point we should be discussing. And what happened in the third year is also something we should be talking about. The third year saw good production, yes, but very poor prices. Last Rabi and the current Kharif harvesting season and the marketing season has seen prices crash across commodities, across crops. So the farmer suffers when there is no rain, they suffer because there is poor crop. When they have good crop, they again suffer. Now, what is it? Is it the result of merely international prices? In some commodities, yes, but not in all commodities. And the more important thing to remember is that this government, led by Mr. Narendra Modi, had made a solemn promise to the farmers. He had said, I will ensure something which Congress did not, which is cost plus 50% shall be delivered to you as MSP. The farmer is asking today, what happened to that? Nowhere is this MSP being raised to cost plus 50%, let alone that. Farmers are not even realizing the actual MSP declared by the government. This is why farmers are angry. There is a lovely talk about doubling the income of farmers. I love all these slogans. I really sometimes wish there would be less slogans and some action would begin. Should we not ask this government, all right, you want to double it in 7 years. How much have you done in the first 3 years, sir?
Okay, Mr. Yogendra Yadav, I think you raised a valid point about farm loan income, and trust me, I have a segment that's dedicated to farm loan income. I also have very dedicated questions to the MSP, and I'll address both of those issues, but I do want to get opening comments from the Congress party. And Mr. Salman Soz, I know you'll be tempted to lambast this government as far as poor agricultural growth is concerned, but if you actually look at the world around us, and I agree, 2 droughts, global commodity crash in which global food prices have fallen, figures already given by Sandeep there as far as wheat is concerned, down 47%, maize down 39%. Can we, will you spare them some agony, or will you actually say it is the government's fault that the rural distress is so acute?
I think Yogendra Yadav had a pretty strong critique of what the government has done. I know GVL has to parrot out some talking points that his party office probably hands out to him. But if things were really that good, then the results would be in front of us. But the story remains that things are really bad. And in addition to what Yogendra Yadav said, because I agree with a lot of what he said, one time when the government could have actually really helped the farmers was when, after 2 seasons, 2 droughts, the third year we had a really good weather, great output, and what did the Prime Minister do? He did demonetization. Prices fell by 20 to 30% across products, and when you have something like that happening, how can you recover? No, seriously, it's a crazy kind of thing. So here things are just now, people are recovering, and you implement one of the most ill thought out policy initiatives, and who's suffering? The same farmers that you promised the moon just during your election campaign, and now you're promising them a bigger moon in 2022. I think if they're really serious, then they would go and look at their manifesto from 2014, which promised modernization of the food supply chain. Where is it? What's going on with that? They talk about the Fasal Bima Yojana. I'm sorry, that's not working. Mr. Yadav already told you that. The reality is that farmers are suffering, and part of the problem, I think, as a country, and this is not a political point, part of the problem is that we are constantly looking at consumers and elevating their interests over the interests of farmers who face a very uncertain life.
Fair.
And we have to come together and figure out what to do about that.
Salman, that's a very valid question you've raised on, whose interest should matter more. Is it that of the consumer, the urban consumer, or the farmer? And we'll debate that. GVL, a quick counterpoint before I go to the experts on the panel who've been waiting patiently. GVL, I'm giving you 30 seconds for a quick counter.
No, it's very well for the Congress party and to really give speeches, but then they have accountability. You are in power in states like Karnataka. Agriculture is a state subject. You have had a massive drought in Karnataka last year, 160 of 175 talukas. What have you done? How have you given relief to the farmers? I've just traveled to Gujarat and I've been keeping track of Karnataka as well. Number of farmer suicides has increased 4 times in Karnataka. What has been your response to it? Both political and governmental response. I think you think the central government will bail you out. You don't have any accountability to the people. When it comes to Yogendra Yadav, he has no accountability at all. He needs to just make statements. And for a party, the Congress party in power, you have to show your response.
Okay.
And in Gujarat, whereas we are ensuring MSP for the farmers, by buying at a 500 crore budget for the state, Karnataka government is not spending a penny.
Okay,
So you show your own response.
GVL, you made your point.
Speeches.
GVL, you made your point. Let me allow me to interrupt you. And Salman, I know you want to come in, but let me go to our experts. We've got 2 distinguished experts from the agriculture sector, and I want to get in a word from them. Ajay V. Jakar, do you see an intent to fix the problem? You were there in the meeting this morning, the pre-budget consultation with the finance minister. Do you see an intent to fix the structural troubles plaguing the agriculture sector? It's not about BJP or the Congress, central government or the state government. It's about political intent to A, acknowledge the problem, and B, fix the problem. Do you believe that there is an intent, and do you think that budget 2018 could be a starting point?
See, I thank the finance minister for calling a consultation on the agriculture sector today, and we were a part of the consultation process. And we made it very clear to the honorable finance minister that farmers and farming is in distress today for various reasons. And I think the budget 2018, which will possibly be the last full year budget for this government, is a very good opportunity to change the policy paradigm from a food policy to a farmer's policy. And we have given suggestions to the government, and we are hopeful that the government will actually implement a lot of those suggestions. And but the reality is that real incomes of farmers are falling. The scope of doubling farmers' income is a daydream as of today. And that's a hard fact that we have to digest. And I think the government acknowledges the crisis and they will act on it. They have already taken some positive steps on implementing import duties on oilseed imports. They have taken some steps for allowing export of pulses. So they're moving in the right direction, but I don't think so they are enough, and they're too slow for that.
All right, so we're perhaps moving in the right direction, but it will be difficult to gallop to get to the dream of doubling farm income. Valid point there. But I'm going to take this across to Siraj Hussain. And Mr. Hussain, do you believe we as a country and we as policy makers, and I'm including both the NDA and the UPA, I've got representatives from both sides, and I think it's only fair that I portion blame on both. I'm including both sides of the political spectrum. We've resorted to these quick fix band-aid solutions for agriculture in the form of farm loan waivers. Do these really help? Can they really address the problems? Can they really address the chronic issues that Indian agriculture faces?
I realize that farm loan waivers alone cannot solve the problems of Indian agriculture. But I had written with Dr. Gulati an article that farm loan waivers are basically an atonement for the injustice done to agriculture in previous years. Actually, you have representatives from 2 major political parties. Generally, they would not agree with each other on any point, but I have worked with both the governments. So I know that all the governments try to do their best for agriculture sector and also for other sectors. However, there are some basic issues which need to be addressed. And these are difficult decisions because the government in power has to balance the interest of the consumers as well as the farmers. And therefore, the dilemma before the government is how to achieve that fine balance. Unfortunately, a number of reform measures, major reform measures, which were expected from a government which has full majority in parliament, everybody was expecting that those decisions will be taken, but they are very difficult decisions, no doubt. They are yet to be taken. For example, a reform of food subsidy. We are spending something like 1,65,000 crores on food subsidy. We have written a paper, Shweta Saini, me and Dr. Gulati, in which we have said that at least in some states where the digital infrastructure is good, literacy rates are high, food availability is high, switch over to direct benefit transfer of food subsidy. Punjab, for example, there is no reason why the government should be physically distributing grains in Punjab or Haryana or some other states. So we have not seen the kind of major reforms which were expected, but I think that will wait for the next government, since we are in the last year of the government. However, there are a number of things which this government has done very well, and we must give full credit for that. One is the crop insurance scheme. Even though I may be considered to be partisan because I wrote the scheme, the difficulty is that we should not be blaming centre for everything.
The state governments have
it is the same Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana which was implemented very well by Tamil Nadu.
Sure. Mr. Sen, if I may just interrupt you, we do want to talk about the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and I know Yogendra Yadav has a different point of view, so does Mr. Ajay V. Jakar. But before I come to that, I want to get done with this topic on farm loan waivers. I want one question quick to the political representatives, and then we will discuss each of these issues. One on minimum support price, the other is on Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and of course ENAM as well is another thing that we will talk about. But quickly on farm loan waivers, Yogendra Yadav, given the fact that this efficacy of farm loan waiver, the political class, both the BJP and the Congress, when it suited them, have looked at farm loan waivers as a tool to appease distressed farmers, and like Mr. Hussain says, it's a way of atonement for years of neglect for the farming community. But what about the efficacy of farmers? Given the fact that 48% of farmers, as per data, do not have access to institutional credit, so the marginal farmers in any case don't have access to institutional credit, and so the farm loan waiver isn't reaching them. So you've traveled across the country. Apart from the political dividend that it could yield, does the farm loan waiver do any good?
The question is not whether farm loan waiver in itself is a solution. The answer is obviously not. Farm loan waiver, any kind of loan waiver for someone who has no income is not a solution. The person would demand loan waiver 5 months from now again. The real question we should be asking is whether farm loan waiver needs to be part of a larger package of addressing rural distress. And the answer to that is yes. Giving farmers prices alone is not sufficient, because much of that additional price that they receive would go into servicing these loans, which are impossible for them to pay. And the ordinary standards which are used for industry, trade, for everything else, which is to say, if your loan runs into a bad situation for reasons which are beyond you, then the state steps in and says, we waive it. This applies completely to the farmers. The only problem is that political parties are extremely hypocritical about it. BJP says loan waiver in Uttar Pradesh. My question is, sir, in which way is Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar any different? Congress announces loan waiver in Gujarat. I want to see why not everywhere else. Is that your national policy? So yes, I can see it's done occasionally for mere electoral dividend. But at this moment in history, farmers of India badly need a one-time loan waiver. But that loan waiver should not be confined only to institutional loans. It should include private money lenders' loan as well, which has been provided for by the Kerala Debt Relief Commission. We need a similar National Debt Relief Commission for long-term redressal of this problem. That would be a proper package that we need right now.
As a channel and as one of the channels that is at the forefront of business news, we don't really stand by farm loan waivers, but it's an interesting thing that you're saying, that it can't just include institutional credit, it should include private money lenders as well, because which is where the debate is. 48% of farmers are outside your institutional credit system. How does this farm loan waiver benefit them at all? Mr. Jacker, do you have a point of view there? Do you think it's possible at all to resort to a farm loan waiver, which is so encompassing that it does not just include institutional credit, but private money lenders as well? And as a credit discipline, I mean, I know, people sneer at us when we talk about credit discipline, and they turn around and say you don't see it for big fat cats of Indian industry, why not the farmer? But as a credit discipline, is this a good thing to happen?
The good thing about being on this TV debate today is that there's an old African proverb which I'll just quote, which says, until lions have their own historians, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Today, the hunter are TV channels, academics, political personalities, government officials, and everyone around us are the hunters who are trying to make a name out of farmer distress. And when you look at farm loan waivers, Mr. Yogendra Yadav has said that you need to look at non-institutional loans also. I think we also need to look at tenant farmers, sharecroppers, we need to look at Adivasi farmers, we need to look at even those kinds of farmers. And when you look at, if you think the quantum of farm loan waiver that's being announced by different states is high, before you come to that conclusion as a TV channel, you should ask the government about the 7th Pay Commission. Now, 7th Pay Commission, annual, just increasing, they've increased salaries, and the budget is 1 lakh crore rupees per year. Annual budget increases 1 lakh crores per year, which is not the total quantum of farm loan waiver that is being announced by all the states at the moment. I think before 2019, the way the country is moving, the government will be compelled to give us an agriculture debt relief package, and they will not have an option. They cannot go for 2019 elections until the central government announces this package. And I think that's the political reality that all political parties will have to come with. They will have to put it in the manifestos, and it's something that we will force them to do. You like it or not, I mean, what the TV channel likes or not is irrelevant, and that must clearly be understood.
You've made a passionate plea, and like Yogendra Yadav said, and probably a farm loan waiver and the merits of having one is a debate in itself. Has it done good to us over the years? What does it do to credit discipline, etc., and the cost of it that the economy has to bear, like we did in the case of 2009, is a debate in itself. Let's park that thought. But I want to raise another point that I think Salman Soz made, and I want to take it up with GVL Narasimha Rao, and I think it's a point that Mr. Hussain also made, which is on this whole policy framework of the government being biased in favor of consumers as against the farmers. So you cannot have a policy framework on agriculture biased in favor of both. The balance in the previous government was clearly tilted towards the farmer. In this case, many would argue it's tilted in favor of the consumers, and actions over the last 3 years indicate that. GVL, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but would you agree that that's what has happened over the last 3 years, that the bias is in favor of the consumer? So every time a price of tomato goes up, or potatoes go up, or onions go up, the government clamps down to ensure that prices are brought under control so that the consumer is not affected. GVL.
No, I would completely disagree with that. You have to see everything in a perspective. This government is certainly sensitive to the concerns of both the farmers and the consumers. I think within a few months after coming into power, we have increased the drought relief for the farmers by nearly 50%. The farmer crop insurance scheme is certainly a major scheme. There is Prime Minister's irrigation scheme where investments have started going into it. Certainly this government, but you need a balance. I agree, you need a balance. You cannot work for one against the other. You have made promises to the people. The MSP is not as we would have liked it to be. But even today, the MSP is about 42-45% of the cost of production. 142% of the cost of production. So we are not very way off from that 50% promise. In the case of pulses, it's much more than 50%. But what we need to ensure is farmers indeed get the MSP. I think there are some kind of situations where farmers have not been able to realize that money. That is where state governments have intervened. I can tell you the example of Gujarat, where state government has not only offered bonuses on the MSP, but is also buying at the MSP rate from the farmers. And one important initiative this government has taken, none of you seem to have mentioned, is that all the food commodities in the present regime, in the GST, all unbranded commodities have been kept at 0% tax. Right. It's a huge benefit. You don't have to pay purchase tax. You don't have to pay VAT. Anyone who sells at agricultural mandi, APMC, today doesn't have to pay these taxes. Right. So it's a benefit, in my estimate. It is not less than about at least 1 lakh crores, at least 1 lakh crores of savings to the farmers and consumers together, which must have contributed to better prices. And to stabilize prices for the consumers, we have come up with a price stabilization fund. And that's not really militating against interests of the farmers. And also during the period of our tenure, you have seen a crash in international food grain prices. And as a result, bigger increases in MSP is not possible. You will have to keep the international prices in view.
I do want to take the point of MSP forward, and I'll let Salman Soos come in. But Salman, I also want to make the point about, we can't overlook the fact that MSP increases lead to food inflation that in turn have implications on macroeconomic stability. We've gone through that unstable period in a while. How does one balance that concern that yes, the farmer should be paid good MSP, but it is inflationary in nature and it has these widespread ramifications?
Well, first, I know GVL and BJP people are very agitated these days, and I know he talked about Karnataka, but I don't want any lectures from a party whose senior leader has been arrested in Maharashtra because he's speaking out for farmers. And we don't want to hear about the Gujarat model anymore because they're going to get, I think they're going to get defeated out there because people like farmers are distressed. This party people should know that MSPs have risen at among the slowest rates in decades under BJP. You know, talk about some rise. These people make a virtue out of MSPs. MSP rise has been extremely slow under this government. Also, by the way, look at the policies. Look at exports. Because if you have exports of agricultural products, you get some, you get some decent remuneration for farmers. In 2004-2005, agricultural exports were $3.6 billion. In 2013-14, they were $25.6 billion. In 2016-17, they're $8.6 billion. Because of restrictive export policies of this government. Who does it hurt? It hurts farmers. Now, now GVL will say we've got to have this balance between consumers and farmers. It seems very good, but it seems to me, and to others perhaps around this table, that farmers are being hurt disproportionately. And that is because of policy frameworks. So they have to answer for that. You know, I think that's as simple as that. As far as waivers are concerned, I ask everybody on this panel, people watching the show. Today, there was a report in the Indian Express, I think, that public sector banks have to, basically waive off about, what, 1 lakh crore rupees of loans, for this particular year. It's already 56,000 crores so far. We don't really talk about those haircuts. Why don't we talk about loan write-offs when industries are involved? When farmers are involved, we say, oh, this is going to be a huge problem for the economy.
Sure.
We have to be really consistent. We have to be fair. We have to have a policy framework that works for everybody.
Okay,
if a loan waiver in some ways is bad for the farmers, then it should be bad for industrialists as well.
Salman, you made your point. Salman, you made a point, and just one point in defense of this government. I think this government has taken some drastic, some would say draconian, but many would say drastic steps to send a signal to corporate India that that you have to be accountable for money that you take as a loan from a public sector banks. Many in the industry and many commentators have criticized the government for having gone so far with the IBC ordinance, but they've taken steps in that direction to send a signal. But let's leave that aside. Mr. Hussain, having worked with both the UP and NDA government, you having been privy to these decisions on increasing MSP of agri products, it's a very, very contentious one. And let's look at what was committed. I think both Yogendra Yadav and Salman Soos pointed out that in the 2014 manifesto, this government committed a 50% increase in MSP. The Ramesh Chand report, which many believe was a sort of path-breaking report, again recommended that a new cost-linked MSP formula that would have again taken MSP of various agri products by up to 50%. Let's look at what has happened in 2017. Paddy, the return over cost is up by 4.4%. It's higher by a little over 5% from what it was last year. The MSP for Arhar, it's again up 18.2% as far as return over cost is concerned. But in case of cotton, it's down 8%. In case of sunflower seed, it's down almost 10%. Do you fault the government for not having done enough in increasing MSP prices, or like GVL pointed out, the fact that they were constrained, this is all that they could do? What is your own view?
Actually, whenever the MSP is to be decided by the government on the recommendation of the CACP, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, the Agriculture Ministry, the Food Ministry for agricultural products, they have, generally speaking, contrarian views. While the Ministry of Consumer Affairs would like the MSP not to be increased too much so that the prices do not go too high, the Ministry of Finance would not like the MSP to be raised too much because that raises food subsidy, because wheat and rice are then procured at a high MSP. The Ministry of Agriculture would push for higher MSP because that benefits the farmers. So ultimately it is a call which is taken by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, which finally decides the MSP. However, it is true that it is a host of factors other than the cost which are also considered by the government while deciding the MSP, and one of them is the global scenario. No government can fix MSP which is so high that the Indian agricultural produce becomes totally uncompetitive. So it is a difficult exercise and a balance is sought to be achieved by the government. However, it is true that in the UPA government, the MSP rose much higher than in the NDA, the current government, and the reason was that in 2005, 6 and 6, 7, we imported 55 million tons of wheat, 5.5 million tons of wheat, and it was very difficult for the government to maintain the stock as per the buffer norms. So as a result of that, the government of India took a conscious decision to incentivize the Indian farmers, and there was handsome increase in almost all the commodities. And many economists at that time, including some very reputed economists who are now the members of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, they wrote a series of articles blaming the higher increase in MSP for food inflation at that time. So the point is that irrespective of who is in power, fixation of MSP is a complicated business, and in any case, since the government procures just about wheat and rice, and it is only the sugarcane and cotton farmers who get the benefit of government fixed price, other farmers do not get the benefit. So there are a whole lot of other things other than MSP which have to be done and which have not been done, unfortunately.
Why do we not let market forces operate in agriculture like we do in industry? I mean, every time prices of agri-commodities go up, we clamp down on exports, we put a ban on exports. Why do we resort to mechanisms like that? Why do we not let market forces operate in agriculture just like it does in industry? Is that a valid point to make or not?
Number one, because we have not allowed market forces to operate for the last 60 years. Because farm product prices have been systematically depressed by the government. Remember, there was time when the government used to put something called a levy before the MSP etc. came into being. And number two, because farming is not one of your routine activities, it is related to food sovereignty. And number three, because it concerns, we cannot be concerned only about production. We need to be concerned about the producer. For these three reasons, the government has to come in, the government has to play a role. On the question of, Mr. Siraj Hussain made a very interesting point, but I thought it was lost in technicalities. I would reduce it to a simplification. I think it's all about political will. That's what I thought he said. It's all about political will and political priorities. And this is what is lacking. Here is a government, and I would again repeat, a government that makes a categoric promise and then reneges on it. A government in whose regime the MSP has not increased even in the proportion to which the previous government had done, which they had criticized. 3, here is a situation where even the government announced MSP is not respected. I thought Mr. Narasimha Rao was very euphemistic when he said in certain situations. Mr. Rao, that certain situation applies to every single crop this year. In not a single crop have the farmers got MSP, and this is from the official data that we have demonstrated. And finally, as Mr. Siraj said, that in any case, this entire thing applies only to 2 or 3 crops. what about the remaining crop? We need to come up with mechanisms. One, which is about deficit pricing. That is to say, if there is an MSP and I sell it for lower than that, the deficit has to be made up by the government in one way or the other. There are various kinds of models for that. And two, there has to be market intervention. When prices start falling, just as retail prices of onions starts going up, the government intervenes. Similarly, when the crop prices start falling, that's also the time for the government to intervene, which hasn't happened. Import-export policies need to be fine-tuned. I agree that the steps taken by the government are in the right direction,
but a lot more
they
needs
are
to be done.
Also poorly timed.
Okay.
In most cases, the action took place when the damage was already done.
Fair enough. You know, Yogendra, I would love to get GVL to counter that. We've got a lot of ground to cover and only 15 minutes left on the debate. So I'm going to quickly move to Mr. Jakar and ask him another issue that was discussed, I understand, in the meeting today. Mr. Ashok Gulati, I'm told, brought it up, which is, the launch of an Operation Top in lines of the Operation Flood. Top is for tomatoes, onions and potatoes. He's written about it in the past as well. How feasible is it, Mr. Jakar, to procure directly from farmers and sell it through millions of stores, wherein farmers could get more bang for the buck, can get about 70 to 80% of what the consumer is paying and eliminate the middleman. How feasible is that, Mr. Jakar?
See, you brought up too many topics in one question. Discussing on the issue of tomatoes, onions and potatoes, which are the crops which are more in focus in the media because prices spike a lot and government normally intervenes. As a farmers organization, we have consistently said that if the government is responsible for reducing the price of our produce, it should set a floor price that should the price fall below the floor price, then the government has to intervene and pay the difference between the floor price and whatever the market price is getting. But the government is obviously missing on all these parameters. I think there are larger issues that could actually affect and improve farmer livelihoods, which this discussion about budget 2018 is taking place. So I'd want to bring this topic to those important issues. And I want to flag two important issues which are definitely required for India, for rural India, for Make in India, and that is devaluation of the Indian rupee. Now that is what farmers require at the end of the day to solve a lot of our problems and solve a lot of problems that India is facing. And also the 15th Finance Commission has been constituted under Mr. N.K. Singh, and unfortunately that Finance Commission has set the government has set some parameters on which fiscal incentives will be given. Now those include things like Digital India and all, but I think what you need to include in these things is how do you give incentives for increasing farmer profitability, prosperity? How do you give incentives to increase productivity? Now, till we don't go to these structural issues, we will only start debating on political lines. We'll talk about MSP, which is a minuscule part of the whole agriculture framework. So I really think that the debate needs to shift to structural issues. For example, Mr. Siraj Hussain, who's worked with both the governments, has said that Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is a fantastic idea. I think it's a fantastic idea and this government has really taken it forward. But the problem is that the design is so bad that it's failed, it's collapsed literally across the country. It's collapsed, like you mentioned, ENAM. Because when the government insists that every state follow a particular program and only then they will get incentives from the central government, it's a wrong design. It's a federal structure in this country. The government has to allow states to form their own crop insurance policies. The government has to allow ENAM and interportability. If interportability is there, they should allow electronic trading platforms for every state to develop their own platforms. So I really think that the federal structure of this country is being destroyed, the way money is being doled out to the states, and these are structural issues that will actually impact farmer livelihoods. I mean, let's get real about these issues. I mean, this is not about politics, this is not about BJP, this is not about Congress. For the last 20, 30, 40 years, we've had a food policy, like I said in the beginning, and the food policy basically means targeting to produce more food. Right. But producing more food actually destroys farmer prosperity, because when you produce more fruit, the prices fall down and the government shuts its eye. And these are issues that we need to take up on the debate.
It's ironical that's the reality, but GVL Narasimhan, I think you want to come in and counter that.
You see, certainly there is, after the GST, the movement of goods and agricultural commodities has become certainly far better, far easier. We need certainly even more reforms in agricultural marketing to ensure, to improve efficiency so that the farmer gets the best price that is available to him in the market. The ENAM was certainly a good start, but there is still a long way to go. But see, the central government is not imposing anything. When the central government is passing on a large amount of subsidy for implementing the insurance scheme, I think the central will have to have some kind of a design of flexibility. If some suggestions are there, if some improvements are possible, this government is always open. Let me tell you this. No, this.
The central government have incentives, and in a federal structure, it has to allow states to make schemes based on the individual state's needs. For example, Punjab has 205% cropping intensity. Other states have 70% intensity. How can you have the same insurance scheme for both the states? It's ridiculous.
I really think the debate is moving into a direction where I wanted to take it, which is the states. And Salman Soz, I'm just going to ask you this question. Do states also need to do the heavy lifting? Look at the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana that we were just talking about, or ENAM for that matter, which was launched with much fanfare. It hasn't been a success because states have been very lax in quick dispensation of claims. States have given a very lukewarm response to ENAM. So, I mean, you know, the burden also has to be on the states to do the heavy lifting. We can keep talking about the central government, and we should, but we can't absolve the states of their own responsibility.
I think you have to carefully listen to what Ajay was saying. The government comes up with a plan, and basically it's a cookie cutter kind of approach where, you know, this is the plan, everybody has to do this. I think what Prime Minister Modi thinks is that he's still the Chief Minister of Gujarat, where he had all the power in the world. This is India. India is a very diverse country. It has diverse needs in different states. States want to work with the government. Look, most of the state governments now are BJP governments. So why are they not doing the work then? The reason they start working is because it's a one-size-fits-all approach, and that doesn't really work. Otherwise, it would have worked because they have BJP governments in the states and in the center. You know, this whole ENAM, which reminds me of the E-Chopal, you know, the old times, and NDA 1. I think this is this kind of centralized power structure, and, you know, diktat from Delhi, do this, and we'll give you the money. I think that's not going to work. You know, I think over and over again, we are seeing with this government that we talk about implementation failures all the time. So I think this is incompetence. So maybe this government is really incompetent. You know, there are 23 priority projects that the government had come up with. They were supposedly good projects, 23 of them, and they were supposed to be delivered by March of 2017. Not one of them was delivered. You know, for all this, Mr. Modi was this famous administrative kind of guru, and here we are. We're talking about this government's incompetence.
Okay,
frankly,
Salman.
That's what it is, and centralization of power.
Okay.
Unless they start rethinking this stuff, it's not going to.
When you were in power, things have started moving. There is still a long way to go, but things have started actually moving in this government.
Okay. GV, I don't
Prime
want to bring in the
See, one second.
We know it.
Okay, Ajay Jakar, quick
Ask
word.
Mr. Yashwant Singh.
Just one second. I don't think the Prime Minister is responsible for making the fine print. I think the problem is that he has a bad team advising him, and he's going to suffer because of them. His intention of crop insurance for ENAM, everything is good, but he has a bad team, and they are doing a bad implementation, bad fine print job of it. Let's try and make a difference between the Prime Minister is not supposed to make the fine print of a policy.
I'm sorry, Ajay. I'm sorry, Ajay. I'm sorry. I don't.
Salman, we've just
Ajay, I'm sorry. I don't buy this.
I want to get closing comments from my panelists. Salman, allow me to interrupt you. We've just got a few minutes on the debate, and I want to go to Siraj Hussain, who made this point on an earlier show on ET now on the need for a better federal mechanism to, as far as agriculture reforms are concerned, like GST, whatever it is, it's a great example of a federal structure, a policy-making structure where both the center and the states have their skin in the game. They decide the GST rates. It's all right for spokesperson to criticize the GST, but most decisions were taken by a GST council, which has representation of the center and the states. Is that the way to move forward on some of these reforms, whether it is ENAM, whether it is, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, if the architecture needs to be tweaked for a certain state, should we give greater play to states and center and have some sort of a mechanism that allows this to happen? Siraj Hussain?
Yes. See, no government policy is cast in stone. And it is nobody's case that government policies or programs or schemes cannot be modified. Of course, they need to be modified so that every state can take benefit of that. In fact, I would recommend to ET now that they should do a program on 1 or 2 specific schemes and then allow half an hour, 45 minutes discussion, which is state specific, because in a program in which all the schemes of agriculture are being discussed, it is not possible to go into details. There are specific reasons why Punjab is not able to participate in the crop insurance scheme, but I must say that this government went very far, very far in designing the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and a number of states are taking undue advantage of that, including Gujarat. There are a number of districts in Gujarat where a lot of manipulation goes on in the yield calculation of groundnut and other things. But the broad point is that unless the center and the state work together in a sector like agriculture, where about half of our population is working, it will be very difficult to reach a consensus which will allow the formulation of a policy which fits the design of every state, the requirement of every state. So I am quite sure that we need something like GST Council, which meets frequently and through which center makes very serious and concerted efforts to bring states on board.
All right, fair point indeed. The centre and the state, as long as policy making happens in unison, should serve us very well. But I'm going to move to the last leg of this entire debate. And Yogendra Yadav, coming to you, does Union Budget 2018 have to move beyond the incremental steps in irrigation, in crop, Fasal Bima Yojana, in soil testing, and talk about the game-changing reforms that will rescue Indian agriculture, which, mind you, may not be politically palatable?
I think this is the moment. If the government is at all serious about all the big things about doubling farmers' incomes and such like, this is the last occasion to do something tangible. I don't know if it will have effects in 1 year, but this may be a good legacy for this government to leave. As Ajay Jakar said, we need to change our policies which are production oriented to policies which are producer oriented. Farmers' income and their well-being should be at the center of agricultural policies. That would require, yes, some substantial changes, big changes. We need to think about the price issue very substantially, not merely MSP, but also deficit payment, also market interventions. Substantial funds need to be allocated to that. We would need to look at loan waiver of some kind or the other. We also need to think about solid money being invested in irrigation and other projects. The trouble is that for all these, the states do not have money. The states have responsibility. Yes, agriculture is a state subject. They don't have the money necessary for that. And therefore, may I propose another big idea, like you have GST Council. Yes, we should have an agriculture council of that kind, but for that, can we also have dedicated national funds? Maybe a chunk of the interstate GST which is being collected could be a dedicated fund for Indian agriculture, which would be then decided by this council of agriculture minister from throughout the country. That is the kind of a new federal arrangement we need for thinking about agriculture. Thank you.
It's time. You made a very interesting point, GVL. A quick closing comment, and the fact that agriculture needs fresh thought, and I don't think this government is short of ideas. Enough committees, enough reports have been submitted. Some of the finest minds have made suggestions in the meeting today with the finance minister. Some of them, of course, in the panel today. We had Mr. Ashok Gulati, people who've sort of written and spoken about the sector for years in a row. But will there be political will? Will there be political intent to look at tectonic shift when it comes to agriculture, a federal structure of policy making, maybe more funding for the sector? Because again, a quick word that estimates suggest that 640,000 crores of fresh investments are needed in the agriculture sector for farmers' income to be doubled, and that's just one estimate made by one committee. So where is this money going to come from? Is there political will?
Just 1 second. I want to come in because I don't know if you give me more time after this. As a farmer, I want to say that if there is political will in this government, In the forthcoming winter session, they should get the Pesticide Management Bill 2018, which the Congress could not do for 10 years. It was on the table. Now, if they can do that, we'll be thankful to them for that. And that is what political will is about. Let's walk the talk, and let's see if this government can get that bill. The bill is ready, and they need to place it on the table of the House. And these are things that need to be done.
We're not sure if you can comment on the bill. If you can, great. But the larger question, political will.
No. The Prime Minister, as Chief Minister of Gujarat, he had demonstrated, he has completely energized the agricultural sector. When he was the Chief Minister for those 10 years, Gujarat had the highest agricultural growth in double digits. I think the main success of that was investments in irrigation. We've done the same thing, double-digit agricultural growth, and in fact, more than 20% agricultural growth we have delivered consistently in Madhya Pradesh. Chhattisgarh also, all BJP-ruled states, and Maharashtra of late has done extremely well. I think this government, our party has not just the political will, we have demonstrated success stories in several states I've just mentioned to you. And central government will certainly do whatever it needs to do to ensure, to give that kind of momentum to the agricultural sector in the states. We need to work on the agricultural markets, we need to have insurance, we need to have greater efficiency in marketing. We also need to attract private investment. Because in agricultural distribution, we have really, on cold storage development, this country has really not been able to do what we had hoped to do. Certainly, there is a need for even private sector investment to be attracted into it. The government's main priority would be farmer welfare, ensuring farmer income security. This will be the leitmotif of this government. I can assure you this will be done in a very credible manner going forward.
On that note, we've completely run out of time on this edition of the India Development Debate. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen, for being with us and putting such rich solutions forward on the table as far as rescuing Indian agriculture is concerned.
That's right. The solutions are known. It's time to muster political will to take tough decisions to reform the agriculture sector. The government must not give in to populist quick fixes, but instead address structural issues. The government must do all it takes to enable farmers to access the best technologies and best markets, both at home and abroad. A federal council must be constituted to fine-tune existing policies like ENAM and Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana to improve their efficacy.
Indeed, the government should also consider merging the ministries of agriculture and food processing to tap synergies. The big farm push needs political will far more than capital, and both the centre and the states now need to play their part. Thanks very much for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate. Up next is Top 10 at 10 with Tanya Bharadwaj.
Thanks for watching. Good night.